Good evening, everyone. It is August 6th, 2023, past midnight on the East Coast, so I'm a little bit tired as well on the Pacific. Let's get into what I'm looking for tomorrow. Before we do that, let's take a look at this higher time frame view. What I'm looking for ultimately, before I trust really any move up, I want to see us tag 44.85 or lower. Ideally, closing that gap. Oh man, closing that gap at 78s or down to 75s. So I don't really trust any move up until then. So until we get a move down to here or lower, I'm going to be looking for the short side. Now, if we start to linger around this 45.50 number, we might just go ahead and rotate back upwards. So ideally, we find a seller somewhere here. We move down, close that gap, and then we can possibly start thinking about longs. So that's how I'm looking at this on a higher time frame view. So in line with that, how am I looking to trade this tomorrow? 30-minute chart here. This 66 number has been incredibly important in the prior weeks. During June, you saw give great bids, offers, hit a high, offered right there for 30 minutes, slammed down, offers roughly there. So after we tag a VWAP close at 62s, I'd like to get long there. Ideally, we don't even trade down there. Ideally, we just get long at 75s at the 4 p.m. price gap close, or I'd be willing to take look below and the range gap close long. So if the range gap close holds at 78.5, then I'd be willing to take 82s, the -2 standard deviation of last week's VWAP, long 85s and 86 quarter, 85 being the being a weekly point of control, I believe, as well as a daily one, 86 quarter being the first half of the year's close. Above there, I would like to get long 45.02 half, that being the 95% weekly value area low from last week after a move down below last week's low. So if we peak down below here, cannot push down further, if we cannot get into this gap and instead rotate back upwards, I'd look for long at 02s. Above there, for shorts, mostly looking at the 20 to 28 area as the short zone. 20 quarter, I would only take that short after a tag of 28. Same with 26s, only a tag after 28s. 28s being the VWAP close right here, and also where we kind of had the nice little bunch of inventory where we tried to salvage the bid for about 15 minutes. Above there, 40s and 45s, the point of control being at 45s from yesterday. That also just seemed to be a nice spot in general for the past few days here. So I'd be looking to take 40 short, 40 half, that settlement highs number after a tag of the point of control at 45s, or somewhere around 44. Above there, 50 and 3/4, the only other number I'd be interested in getting short, just because it was a nice level for a while here, about 50 to 52. And that'd be after a tag of 54.5, the weekly VWAP close. Above there, not interested in trading. I think you start to get back into that gap close scenario above 70. Nasdaq. Again, higher time frame outlook for a second over here. I don't know why some of these show up like this. Anyway, what I'm looking for here is the same idea. I want to see that lower gap closed, reclaim kind of this zone, move upwards. If instead we just keep moving up, I think you find a seller somewhere in this big area between about 500 and 640. I think you find a seller in here. Shorts reclaim this 550 area, the top of this box, and we start pressing downwards. So same idea as the ES. News-wise, by the way, only Harker tomorrow morning. So in general, looking for a quiet day after a large liquidation session, and after a large liquidation session, and also it just being a Monday in general. Let me just copy and paste this back over. So not hard to really see what I'm looking for. I'd be willing to take 183s long after a tag of a weekly point of control way down at 167.5 and some other stuff. 183s just being, give me a second here, 183s. I'm not really sure what that is. Maybe it's just a level of interest in general. I think so. I think it's just a level of interest. Above there, 239s. Be willing to take that long as well. That being the Q2 95% value area high, roughly somewhere around there. Sorry, 239s is the negative 2 standard deviation of last week's VWAP. It also happens to be that other number, so I like this spot in general. It would be rare for us to trade below there on a Monday. Above there, the actual gap close at 2. Give me a second here. Where is that gap close? That gap closed at 78 and 3/4. I'd be willing to take 273s long, so roughly that high of the day, roughly that gap close high of the day. I'd be willing to take that long after a tag of 249s. Just running some stops there. Here is the main area I'm interested in, pretty much 330 to 360. All of these I'm interested in taking long after a gap close. You've got the weekly low there, the 95% weekly value area low, settlement lows, weekly close, all sorts of good stuff around there. The first half of year's close at 331s. Just in general, I like that that 30-point range. You manage to chop through it and break to the upside. I think it's a great long above there. 443s. Ooh, looks like we're finding the offer there right now. This just kind of being the level that was generally support and generally where we would offer below when we got under it. You can see it there. You can see it again. That's where we had trouble. That's where we sold off of on this Friday as well. So I like that 443 spot. Above there, and so the 443 would only be after a tag of the weekly point of control at 468. So that's also where we churned around on Friday during the liquidation. Above, I'd be willing to take the daily VWAP close at 480 and maybe even 475.5. That first half of the year's high. I'd be willing to take both of those short after a tag of 507s, kind of the highs of this balance if you're looking at something like this. Kind of like this, so I'd want to see us tag something like 507, come back below 480s and hit a short. Above there, 551s would be the last place I'd be looking at a short after a tag of 569.25, that being the daily point of control. I think you start getting above there, and it's the same idea that you run to the August 2nd high at 668 and 3/4 is somewhere around here, and you possibly start filling out that gap that goes up to 730s. So that's the area that I'm interested in on the NQ. About 550 to 180, a 400-ish point range, whatever that is, 380 points. And on the ES, interest in pretty much this 90-point range, give or take, from 44.62.5 to 45.54.5. And I generally think that would be more so looking at us trading something like this for the day, 56-point range on the high end. Hope that makes sense. Hope that helps. Have a great night and trade safe.